together. The king occupied the building now known as the Boculium, near the Prytaneum, as may be seen from the fact that even to the present day the marriage of the king's wife to Dionysus takes place there. The archon lived in the Prytaneum, the polemarch in the Epilyceum. The latter building was formerly called the Polemarchium, but after Epilycus, during his term of office as polemarch, had rebuilt it and fitted it up, it was called the Epilyceum. The Thesmothetai occupied the Thesmothetium. In the time of Solon, however, they all came together into the Thesmothetium. They had power to decide cases finally on their own authority, not as now merely to hold a preliminary hearing. Such then was the arrangement of the magistracies. The Council of Areopagus had as its constitutionally assigned duty the protection of the laws, but in point of fact it administered the greater and most important part of the government of the state, and inflicted personal punishments and fines summarily upon all who misbehaved themselves. This was the natural consequence of the facts that the archons were elected under the qualifications of birth and wealth, and that the Areopagus was composed of those who had served as archons, for which latter reason the membership of the Areopagus is the only office which has continued to be a life magistracy to the present day. 4. Such was, in outline, the first constitution, but not very long after the events above recorded, in the archonship of Aristarchus, Draco enacted his ordinances. Now his constitution had the following form. The franchise was given to all who could furnish themselves with a military equipment. The 9 archons and the treasurers were elected by this body from persons possessing an unencumbered property of not less than 10 minas, the less important officials from those who could furnish themselves with a military equipment, and the generals, strategy, and commanders of the cavalry, hipparchy, from those who could show an unencumbered property of not less than 100 minas, and had children born in lawful wedlock over 10 years of age. These officers were required to hold to bail the praetanes, the strategy, and the hipparchy of the preceding year until their accounts had been audited, taking 4 securities of the same class as that to which the strategy and the hipparchy belonged. There was also to be a council, consisting of 401 members, elected by lot from among those who possessed the franchise. Both for this and for the other magistracies, the lot was cast among those who were over 30 years of age, and no one might hold office twice until everyone else had had his turn, after which they were to cast the lot afresh. If any member of the council failed to attend when there was a sitting of the council or of the assembly, he paid a fine, to the amount of 3 drachmas, if he was a Pentacossia Medimnus, 2 if he was a knight, and 1 if he was a Zeugaites. The council of Areopagus was guardian of the laws, and kept watch over the magistrates to see that they executed their offices in accordance with the laws. Any person who felt himself wronged might lay an information before the council of Areopagus, on declaring what law was broken by the wrong done to him. But, as has been said before, loans were secured upon the person of the debtors, and the land was in the hands of a few. 5. Since such then was the organization of the constitution, and the many were in slavery to the few, the people rose against the upper class. The strife was keen, and for a long time the 2 parties were ranged in hostile camps against one another, till at last, by common consent, they appointed Solon to be mediator and archon, and committed the whole constitution to his hands. The immediate occasion of his appointment was his poem, which begins with the words, "I behold, and within my heart deep sadness has claimed its place, as I mark the oldest home of the ancient Ionian race, slain by the sword." In this poem he fights and disputes on behalf of each party in turn against the other, and finally he advises them to come to terms and put an end to the quarrel existing between them. By birth and reputation, Solon was one of the foremost men of the day, but in wealth and position he was of the middle class, as is generally agreed, and is, indeed, established by his own evidence in these poems, where he exhorts the wealthy not to be grasping, but